we are staying on the... But, you know, I read an interview with him where he explains breaking the waves in a wonderful way. Because you know what's the paradox of the movie, if you've seen it? The narrative is ultra romantic. Passionate love, all that, and so on. But the forum is totally in discord with it. First, it's not what you expect with romantic movie, this, you know, art, smooth movement, gliding, smooth camera, or whatever. No, it's done almost as a documentary. Handheld camera, rough cuts, which are not even well coordinated, and so on. And he says something very interesting. He says that without this tension between narrative and the forum, the narrative would be unbearable kitsch. The function only to be shot in such a way which counteracts the narrative, only in this way can you do such a narrative. Or the opposite example that I like, in many melodramas, even classic Hollywood melodramas, you have a certain narrative, which is stupidly, excessively romantic. If you were to stage it directly, it would have been ridiculous. So you downplay it at the level of how it is acted, but the excess is then re-enters in music. You know, what you couldn't show, you enact it in music. And I found this a very interesting point, where it's not simply that, you got the point, that music illustrates the action. No, music brings out what was too strong for the action, what was not allowed to be enacted directly. You know who did this in a wonderful way? I love the movie. The great Chaplin classic, my best Chaplin, I think, City Lights. You remember at the end, this triumphant exchange of gazes, then you have the end, but the music goes on for some 10 seconds. It's as if you have an excess there. So it's very naive, I know, primitive, what I'm telling you now, and we can go on more in details, but you see my point. Here, film is thinking, I think, where the forum of a film has its own dynamic, which does not simply faithfully render, illustrates the narrative content, but tells more, tells even what is excluded, censored in the content, and so on. This tension between form and content is where cinematic thinking is located. And this, I think, is, although he is overinterpreted, I'm getting tired of it, my Slovene gang, we are now moving from Hitchcock to our, now, I know you know all it, but he is ingenious. For example, we now try to do new volumes on Ernst Lubitsch, who is, I mean, like, one asks the question, to be or not to be. Is there ontologically even possible to imagine a better film, and so on, you know? But what I want to say is that this, this tension, you find it in a masterful way in Hitchcock, because you know how do you see that Hitchcock was thinking in films? Alfred Hitchcock, it's very interesting to read all these books, The Making of, how did he do it? The original idea was, as a rule, not the narrative content. He imagined a certain purely formal movement, a certain movement of a camera, a certain gesture, and so on. And then he, with the help of scenario writers, constructed a story to fit this formal movements. And what I regret now, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, I will stop. What I regret is that, and it's my responsibility, that we were not able to show you here a very traditional clip, the second murder, second Arbogast from Hitchcock's Psycho. I think this is a wonderful example, maybe the best I know, of thinking in cinema. You know, Arbogast climbs the stairs in Mother's house, and you have the standard Hitchcockian exchange of point of view shot, Arbogast observing the stairs, and the objective shot of Arbogast climbing up. Okay, this is the standard way to create tension. But then, you know that famous twisted movement? The camera goes up, and you see this famous, what they call God's view. And then when the creature enters and starts to stab with a knife, Arbogast, you get into the point of view, impossible point of view shot of this creature. This is, I think, one of the elementary matrices of Hitchcock. And the first thing to do, I did this in our collective Hitchcock volume, is I was surprised to discover how systematically Hitchcock resorted to the same procedure. For example, in The Birds, when you have that famous scene when fire explodes, some gasoline station explodes, there is big fire in Bodega Bay. You have Tippi Hedren looking at the gasoline station exploding, this standard subjective objective shot. Then you have the famous shot up there, so-called God's view shot from above. And then Hitchcock does something absolutely ingenious. You first think this is an objective shot, like establishing shot, but then from behind, one bird enters, another bird enters, and the objective shot all of a sudden turns into a point of view shot. And this affects you as a viewer. You thought you are just identified with the camera. Oh, now we see it all. Then you see your gaze is evil embodied. So I claim there is a whole Hitchcockian Gnostic theology in this. How, you know, Hitchcockian theology is a very dark one, is that God is an ignorant, stupid God, and when he intervenes, it's Norman Bates is divine intervention and so on. And it's also narratively true. Like another way Hitchcock is thinking, and then you have to stop me, otherwise it will end bad. There is something that the two films share that we all know and love, Vertigo and Psycho. Both films can be imagined in a much shorter version, around half. Look, how perfectly it would have worked. Imagine Psycho, which stops under shower, Marion under shower, just before the shower murder. It works perfectly. It's a morality story about a girl who, out of despair, steals money, then runs away there, in the shape of Norman Bates. She sees what is ahead of her, the horror, and she withdraws and cleanses herself like she was on the brink of... It works perfectly. Vertigo is the same. It's the... when Madeleine falls, so we think, from the tower, and we see Scotty, James Stewart, in total despair. Imagine that the movie, it's a short 1-hour movie, stops at that point. It's a perfect, shitty psychological melodrama of how, out of excessive love, because of the pressure putting on her, how Scotty kills the woman he loves, and so on and so on. It works perfectly, but then you have part two, a total shift of perspective, and so on and so on. You see, these things interest me, and I am not here formalist in the maybe, I'm not sure. Although he thinks I'm a total idiot, I still, up to a point, appreciate him, David Bordwell. But formalist in a different sense, in the sense that, you see, to understand the film, you should include into its content the message delivered by the autonomy of form. It's a